This is the Master Marketer Show, powered by Proofpoint Marketing. Each week, we explore the mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets the top B2B marketers use to drive results. Gain actionable insights, one masterful, revenue-generating success story at a time. Let's get started.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Master Marketer Show. I am excited for this conversation. Ashley and I have been talking probably for the last, a year and a half, 2 years or something, trying to get something scheduled, and we are finally here. So it's going to be a fun chat. Ashley is the CMO over at Mitratech, and we're going to talk about some marketing leadership concepts that I think are going to be very applicable to really any marketing leader today. So Ashley, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy we finally got the chance to do this.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, hold on.
So
there you go.
Let's kick this off. I think everybody at this point knows we are either formally in a recession or heading into a recession. We've seen a bunch of layoffs here and there. Budgets are tightening, all this kind of not fun stuff.
Yeah.
As a marketing leader, even if your company is not laying anybody off, you're still kind of in this weird position where you have to keep your team motivated through everyone's probably thinking, oh my God, am I next? Even if your company hasn't done anything, right? So that's, I think, the topic I want to really focus in on, because there's a lot of elements to that and being a successful leader. So with that, anything to kick us off, Ashley, in terms of what are some mindsets that a leader needs to have when they are in this type of environment?
Yeah, I think, the remote work is obviously is the new thing. And we are a fully remote company. What was interesting is when I first came on board to Mitratech, we had probably 10 different roles open on the team. So my first job was quite literally just recruit, and get those roles filled. And we did, and we're upwards of 20 people. So we're not a small team. And one of the most important things that I think leaders can really focus on is understanding what's the culture that you want to build. I was lucky enough where I got to really kind of go out and source the people that I wanted, the mindset that I wanted. And I think when it comes to recruiting, that's a really important thing. Make sure you understand the type of culture you want to build. What's the culture of your team, of you as a leader, and really, really kind of attract that type of talent. The other thing that I think is really important is making sure that leaders are very, very intentional. In a remote environment, we lose the water cooler talk. We lose the, hey, come step into this meeting and be a fly on the wall. And so I think we have to be really intentional about our communication, about the way that we talk to team members, the way we reach out. One of the things that just kind of tactically that my team does, we've got a big group team chat, and I'm sure most everybody does, right? But we celebrate the little wins. And so when you think about motivating people and motivating each other, we sort of have this mantra on the team called celebrate everything, stop at nothing. And we truly do. We celebrate those little wins all day long. And, it could be a record-breaking number of registrants for a webinar. It could be a really cool asset that design created, and we drop it in there and we all kind of, share and celebrate those things together. But I think we've lost a little bit of that, and you have to be really intentional to make sure that you're bringing the team together and really rallying them almost on a daily basis.
So there's a couple of things I want to dive into a little bit deeper on that. One is going back to your comment around recruiting, and being specific about what type of, I think you use the word mindsets that you're looking for.
For sure.
How do you do that? As a leader, what are you defining, either formally and informally? And how are you interviewing for that or searching for that from a recruiting perspective?
Yeah, I definitely prescribe to the higher character, trained, skill kind of mindset. And so a lot of what I look for is really, I'm really transparent and I'm really upfront about what the role is going to entail. We move super fast, we change all the time. And so typically when I'm kind of looking at someone's background, a lot of times it's size of company can factor in, do they have experience with a big product portfolio, or were they with a smaller company that maybe only had one product? How do I think they're going to adapt to the fast pace and the change and things like that? So there's some of that tactical stuff. And then, I usually just like to really dig into, I'm not an interviewer where I've got a set of questions, and I jump in and I just immediately start kind of talking and get to know them and peel back, what do they love about marketing? What do they love about what they do every day? What gets them up every day? And I kind of, as you go through, a 20, 30-minute conversation, I think you can uncover quite a bit about how someone's motivated, what kind of environment do they like to work in. I do think remote's not for everybody. And I think you have got to be super honest with yourself about the type of environment where you can really thrive. I've seen people just unravel in a remote environment. And if you don't have the mindset and sort of the ability to be in this type of environment, my gosh, be honest about it and go find a role that's in person, right? Where you get that interaction. So I think even some of that is starting to come into play a lot, as we're talking to people. Is it okay that we're never in an office together? Is that kind of environment something that you can kind of self-motivate yourself through?
Yeah. Was Mitratech always fully remote, or was that just after pandemic?
No, it was after the pandemic. So we have a headquarters in Austin. There we have for sure had like remote as an option, but it wasn't it kind of wasn't the go-to like everybody, like it is now. So, but then we just, after the pandemic, it was just sort of fully remote. It worked for our company. I don't think it's for everybody. I don't think it's for every company. We were one that I think it works really well, and we've found lines of communication and channels and things like that to stay in touch. So it works for us, but certainly not everybody.
I completely agree. And I mean, one of the things that really drives me nuts is a lot of these conversations about like, remote's the only way to go, and remote's better than an office, or hybrid's the way to go, et cetera. It's like you said, the reality is it's not for every organization. It depends on the culture, the type of culture you want to build, and the types of workflows you want to have. And it's not for every person. Because just like you, I mean, we're a much smaller team, but we've also had people that have come through that thought they wanted remote. They've never been remote per se, at least not fully. And we've been fully remote since before the pandemic. That's just how we started. We've been doing this for a little over 5 years now. And there are just some people that they really need, for a variety of reasons, that in-person experience. And there's nothing you can do about that. Like, there's no point of changing. Like, sure, some people can adapt, I think, but a lot of people can't. Like, for some people, they're lonely. Like, they might be single and they're living on their own, and they just want to get out of the house and, be with other people, right? Yeah. Or they're living in a tiny little studio apartment, and it's not a good working environment, or it's, again, the list goes on, right?
Yeah. And I think there was this misconception that, for people that like maybe haven't worked remote and then they go to a remote, there's this perception that, I'm going to be home so I can go, throw laundry in, or I can go. I'm telling you, the meetings, your calendar in a remote environment is so tricky. I have days where I don't even I hardly get up. And so much less, you think kind of, in between breaks and stuff, I can go get things done around the house. And it's just not really the case.
I mean, this is something, I don't want to take us on too much of a tangent, but that's something we can maybe dive into a bit, because number one, I totally agree, which is like, you get extra flexibility. So yes, if your kid's sick or whatever, like something happens, like, yes, it's much, much, much easier. Right. But yeah, if you think you're going to be doing all sorts of chores and multitasking while you're also on a call, no. Now, I will argue that you can, I think, tailor your calendar and your schedule to some of that extra flexibility. So like, and again, I think the higher up the ladder you get, potentially that opens up more. So for example, I will do, sometimes we live in a neighborhood that backs up in a little mountain preserve out in Phoenix. So I'll do my office hours on a morning sometimes as I'm going up the little trail behind our house, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't need to be in front of a full on screen where I need to share or anything. I have to just
exactly.
be listening and talking, right? Like that kind of thing. So I can work those types of things in, but it's still a meeting at the end of the day and you got to be able to focus.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I don't want to take us on too much of a tangent there. I do. One thing I'll throw out there too, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this, is I do think that companies that went from in office to fully remote, they defaulted to meetings as a way of control in terms of like, okay, well, I now I'm not able to now just walk up to this person's desk and say, hey, what are you up to? Or how is this thing going or whatever. So now let's just schedule a bunch of recurring meetings. And then it just completely, in my mind, kills productivity.
Yeah.
So I'm curious on what maybe you and your team have done to solve for that. Because especially on the marketing side, like I think it's even worse than a lot of other teams potentially.
Yeah. There's, even the way we're structured, and it's not unique to our team. At any marketing organization, you've got so much collaboration amongst the team, right? Content, product, field, all of them have to be collaborating. But to your point, you can't bury people in meetings; they'll never get anything done. And so we've really tried hard to when we can really work asynchronously through in like shared docs and stuff like that. I think that could arguably be one of the really positives that came out of kind of a work environment is people realized, hey, we don't need to go into a meeting. We don't need to get on the phone. Let's just jump in a document together. We can both kind of make edits. You can see kind of what I was doing it earlier with one of my content writers working on a press release. And, you can both kind of be in there. You can see each other's changes. You can drop in questions and comments. And if you get pulled away to a meeting, it's okay. Then you can come back to it. And it sort of becomes these kind of living, breathing documents that you can collaborate in. So we found that really successful. The other thing, just to keep kind of ourselves organized, is the whole concept around like a DAISY. I know there's probably some that have other names for it, but making sure that everybody on our team really has clarity around what their role is in a specific initiative or project. So if I'm the requester, I'm the driver, right? And I'm ultimately the project manager for that. And then who are the contributors? Who are the approvers? And what is that kind of, kind of chain of approval to get something done? What does that look like? And being really clear on that. And that seems to have kind of helped reduce, I think, a little bit of the too many meetings issue, where I think people understand really clearly what the expectation is for each one of these kind of projects or campaigns.
Definitely, yeah. We use RACI on our side, similar thing, responsible, accountable, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, it definitely helps, I would say, and then having like those documented workflows and all that kind of stuff definitely helps us. Yep. Also, I mean, we're still iterating on things, and just like everybody else is, but I totally agree on that. All right, so one other thing you mentioned, which I just jotted down, is intentionality. Yeah. As a mindset. Talk about that a little bit more.
So one of the things, and I've realized this, it just flows like across the board, whether it's marketing, whether it's any kind of leadership. I just think right now in this remote environment, every leader has to be really intentional. And, one example, I always talk to my team about being very transparent. I think that's another thing that, you have to be intentional about being transparent on what's going on. I see a lot of things and I'm exposed to a lot of things because, I sit next to, our CEO and I'm in on all these calls with sort of the big business strategy. And if I'm not careful and I'm not really thinking through, hey, what messages do I need to cascade down to my team? Again, you get lost in this remote environment. You get lost behind a computer screen. And so I take notes a ton. And I'll drop notes all the time as I'm in conversations with other leaders, with other functional teams, and I'll make notes that I need to either put in the team chat that I need to make sure I communicate. The board meetings are a great example too, right? There's sort of this perception of like a cloak of secrecy around board meetings. I can remember when I was in an office, years and years ago, I used to bug our executive team all the time when they would finish board meetings and be like, what did you guys talk about? What does the board want to know? And it was just this, And again, having the intentionality when I'm done with board meetings to bring the slides that I can share. I'll bring them up on a meeting with my team, and I'll show them, here's how I took all the great work that you guys have done, how I packaged it together and I presented it to the board. This is the questions I got asked. This is what they care about. To the extent that you can share that stuff, I think it's super important. And so, I just, whether it's communication, all that kind of stuff, I think you have to focus so much more on making it a point to do those things and reach out to your team. Because otherwise they get stuck in silos. They don't know what's going on. They lose their motivation. I mean, nobody's going to work for, a company or a leader that they never see or hear from. And so I think it's just another way to continue to drive the motivation.
What have you seen? I mean, I completely agree with the concept of communicating things down from what comes out of board meetings. Cause I've been in those environments too a while ago where it's, it was completely like, it's like a different world. It's like, oh, these people are over here and we're over here doing our thing. And somehow this all works. Yeah.
Yeah.
What have you found that your team is interested in? Like what kinds of things do they want to know from the board meetings?
So they're usually interested in what is the board, obviously what's the board's reaction to kind of our success? Are they happy? Are they, what does the board kind of think holistically of not just marketing, but like as a business, what's the board's sentiment toward the company and our performance? And then usually it comes down to like where, like I'll present, some level of strategic direction, whether it's for the quarter, for the year. And as we get into kind of those strategy conversations, they're really keen to just always make sure they're doing the right thing. Like these teams want to know, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Are we doing a great job? How can we constantly be getting better? And so I think giving them a lot of that feedback of, hey, we're focusing our dollars in all the right areas. Again, when I'm able to kind of share with them the questions that the board asked, I think that's, they all kind of find that super interesting. What does the board care about? Because again, it's not meant to be some secret thing, but I think sometimes we act like it is, or, because not everyone gets to necessarily participate. And I can remember before I was in the boardrooms, it was just it felt like this big mystery of like, but everyone wanted to know, what does the board think? Is the board happy? Are we? So anyways, I think that kind of stuff, and even just seeing how I present stuff back to them, how do I take the, 200 campaigns we ran, how do we package that up? How do we deliver the right, kind of KPIs to the board and only show them the things that they care about when, tactically we executed on all this stuff, but how do you distill that down to a story that the board really cares about?
Yeah, I think educating kind of up and coming leaders, if you will, on how to do that is so critical, because it's
for sure
I think it's one of the hardest things to do, because like you kind of are brought up showing a lot of detail and looking at all these numbers, and then all of a sudden say, okay, boil this down to 3 numbers for me. Wait, what?
Exactly.
How do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
So do you get your team involved in putting together board presentations?
So I'll kind of request information from them for it, kind of typical, like, hey, we're gonna, whether it's highlighting, certain events that we went to, what was the ROI on it, kind of stuff like that. For the most part, it sits kind of with my directors, we'll kind of collaborate, but even bringing them in, historically, the company hasn't really brought, even in my past, like when I was a director, I never got asked for much for board meetings. And so I think even bringing, to your point, that next tier of leadership down, letting them see the deck, again, we'll kind of work together in the deck, we'll collaborate, we'll drop in, my head of ops will drop in all the numbers, all the KPIs, we'll iterate on stuff together. And even that's been awesome experience for them.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, we talked about transparency. We talked about intentionality. One other thing I want to ask you is, from a mindset perspective, as a marketing team, obviously we talked about collaboration is important, and innovation's a critical component of what we need to do, right? There's always growth targets. Those growth targets require innovation. And how do you keep the team motivated to keep innovating, especially again in this kind of environment? It's one thing where money's being thrown around and everything is great, and the economy is booming and all this kind of stuff. It's another thing where you're kind of consistently looking over your shoulder going, well, are we going to survive this?
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about that is, of course, like everybody, we're looking at, tightening budgets, being really smart about where we spend money, where can we pull back a little bit. And we really, I prescribe to this, theory around active leadership. And all it really means is that, I'm sort of in the trenches alongside my team. Like, they're never going to feel like I'm not right alongside them, like I'm not couldn't jump in and help them. If tomorrow, someone got hit by a bus, I can, I'm right there. I know exactly what's going on. They keep me in the loop, and it helps me eliminate roadblocks for them much, much faster. So we're able to move at a much faster pace, I think, because of how much we collaborate and communicate. And as far as keeping them motivated in sort of the budgetary times we're in, I think the fact that I do collaborate with them a lot. I keep lines of communication really open. I'm constantly, dropping them ideas and seeing stuff out in the market that, maybe another company's done that's really cool. And I'll send them a screen grab of it and say, hey, maybe we should try this on our next campaign. Or, hey, I really like this graphic design or this layout. When we first kind of announced that we were tightening budgets a little bit, everyone's default is, okay, well, we're just going to have to do more email, right? Because that's doesn't really cost us anything. And so we had to be, again, really intentional to tell the team, like, no, we gotta be really creative, because more email is absolutely not the answer to, hey, we're tightening budgets, we can't do this event. We got to reach customers somehow. So everyone kind of defaults to email. And so we're doing a lot more digital, really looking at some smart retargeting. How do we do, take some of the dollars from maybe kind of events and push them into digital and get really creative with ads and different things like that. So I think I just think being an involved leader, letting your team know that you're right there with them. I sending them all these ideas and things like that, I think helps keep them, motivated and kind of keep their head in the game.
It's actually an interesting topic maybe to dive into a little bit, which is, what you're describing pretty much is, okay, it's all about effective budget allocation, right? It's not just, okay, well, let's just dump everything in email and cut let's just do more email and cut everything else.
Exactly.
It's how do we effectively reallocate budget?
Yeah.
How do you get your team in? Well, I guess the first question: do you get your team involved in those discussions? Because I'm assuming you've got, with a team of 20 some people, you've probably got people doing paid versus email versus events versus whatever, right? And everyone's got their own budget line item, and people get protective of those things. How do you manage that?
So, I kind of lean back a little bit on just the culture of the team. The leadership team is equally as involved. So my directors are just, hyper involved in the business. There's a ton of trust that we have. We'll definitely collaborate with them as far as with our field team and say, hey, what events did we see, both qualitatively and quantitatively, right? What events did we really see some success at? Because sometimes, events are especially a tricky topic, right, to prove ROI. They stay real close to the sales team. So, okay, help us, if we've got these 10 events, how do we distill this down to 5? And then, a lot of times just for kind of speed and agility, at the leadership level, we'll kind of take that, make some decisions on the level of involvement that we'll have, and then kind of feed that back to the team. But even this year when we pivoted a little bit, took a few events away, pushed some of that money into maybe, partnering with some really good organizations in our various, kind of sectors. And the team is super agile. Again, it's just that mindset of, we're going to move fast, we're going to pivot quickly, we're all in this together. We celebrate the wins. That kind of mentality really it breeds fast decision making. And so we're able to kind of all stack hands, I think, pretty quickly. There's a ton of trust on the team. But to your point, it comes back to making sure that you're, as a leader, you're setting the tone for what the culture of the whole team looks like.
Yes, I wonder, this is probably a good transition into talking about some skill sets. You mentioned speed and agility several times. And kind of the way I think about it, especially in this environment, is speed equals revenue, right? Like if you can move faster, if you can close deals faster, if you can drive more inbound faster, that faster equals more revenue in a given period of time. So talk about that skill set. Like how do you train and empower speed, if you will?
Yeah, it's a super good question. There's probably two parts to it. One, I think you're just going to naturally, you either kind of naturally have work at that pace and kind of have that sense of urgency. It's kind of like what you would look for in a salesperson, right? Like, do they have the sense of urgency to go close deals, to drive forward sales cycles, right? All that kind of stuff. So there's that kind of just someone's going to have it or they don't. Thinking about just kind of looking for the skill set, private equity private equity typically runs at this pace. We run at a really fast pace. It's just the nature of the business. I absolutely love it, but it's definitely something that when we have conversations when we're interviewing people, that we let them know, hey, one, did they come from a private equity backed, portfolio company to where they understand that? And if they didn't, again, we try to be really clear and really transparent that this is the nature of the way this business works. So that's kind of the stuff that's harder to probably coach. You want an element of that just naturally in somebody that you're going to bring on board. And we haven't been perfect. We've certainly had people on board that got in and were just like, oh, this is not for me, and that's okay. It's perfectly okay. As far as kind of coaching it, again, I think we've not been perfect. I think sometimes we tend to, like everybody, you want to do everything for everybody and you want to be responsive to everybody. And so I think with the speed, you have to be a little bit careful that you don't go so far the other way where you start to actually be a little bit kind of sloppy with campaigns or things like that, right? So there's sort of that middle ground, but things like giving them the right tools to be able to do their work, to collaborate together, keeping meetings off calendars, just giving them an environment and the things that they need in order to move at the pace you're running. You can't fill someone's calendar with 10 meetings a day and then expect them to still operate at, a certain pace. So I think those kinds of things are really important.
Yeah. And getting back to our, I think, calendar and meetings discussion a few minutes ago, I think that to me is a critical skill for leaders to have and to instill in your team as kind of time boxing and controlling your own calendar and things like that. How do you what do you do to help your team with those things? Because I know that, again, that in my mind, that's one of the biggest time sucks and detractors from an effectiveness perspective.
Yeah. I'll do this every once in a while, every probably couple of weeks. I try to ping the whole team in our team chat and remind people, hey, we're getting to the end of a quarter, or we're getting to the end of a month. Go now, today, find 10 minutes and go block off an hour for the next 4 weeks at lunchtime or in your morning or in your afternoon or wherever you work best. It's what I do. And I try to, you got to do it a few weeks ahead of time because you won't, calendars fill up so fast. And so, I tell them and I try to remind them a lot, make sure that you're blocking off time on your calendar to just not be in meetings. And then the other one is making sure that you reiterate, and you have to lead by example, right? I have to make sure that I don't have 17 meetings a day. I do sometimes, but I have to make sure that I'm also leading by example and reminding people, don't book a meeting when someone's blocked off, right? Don't make someone have to pick which meeting they attend. The double booking thing, I think sometimes can get out of control too. And it's people have no regard for, their calendar says full, but I'll make them choose between their current meeting and mine. I hate that. So I think being respectful of people's time and the time they have blocked is also really key.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because I'm thinking back to my big corporate days, which is a while ago now, but I think the bigger the organization, the more of that you get is because people just get so frustrated with scheduling. Like, okay, screw it, whatever. I'm just going to book over, and if they can show up, great.
Yeah.
I definitely resonate with the leading by example thing, because there was a time where I would say, well, yeah, just block your time. And I'd always be the one, like, if my time be blocked and someone asked me a question, hey, can you pop into this? Oh, yeah, sure, no problem. And I'd say, well, wait a second. If I'm doing that, how do they possibly feel comfortable saying no, especially if I'm the one that's potentially coming to them with a request?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I've started doing it. It's hard. It is very hard to tell your own team no.
It's very hard. And especially when, you know, I love being involved. I always tell them, like, reach out to me. Like, I am useless to you if I don't know what's going on. Like, if I'm the leader that just, you know, isn't kind of actively engaged, doesn't know tactically what we're working on and what pieces we're moving around, I'm useless as a leader. Like, I can't. And so I think that involvement. I also think, just thinking about, you know, kind of calendars and the speed and productivity, you have to be able to empower your teams to make certain decisions, right? There's a lot of decisions that they do not need my perspective on. And you know, I think sometimes people will feel uncomfortable maybe making certain decisions, like, oh, I should call Ashley, or I should get her feedback. Sometimes it's something quick, they could Teams me, but other times, you know, when someone will ask me to make a decision, the first thing I'll turn around and say is, well, what would you do? You know, what's your take? And I think the more that you kind of like pose questions like that, they're able to realize, oh, okay, I didn't need to reach out to her, or so I think that kind of empowerment for decision making too is really key. And again, when someone can't pop into your office, you know, and say, hey, what do you think about this quick thing? Give me a quick, you know. And so I think, anyways, I think that kind of stuff is really helpful.
Yeah, totally. I think, and you have to kind of marry the two a little bit. So, for example, like what I do, I started doing like official office hours 3 times a week.
Oh, nice.
So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'll do an hour of office hours, and I just literally pop into Google Meet. It's open. Yep. At any point, someone can try to pop in and do that kind of you know, knock on your door or whatever. Hey, can I ask you something quick type thing? And it's, I would say probably 80% of the time, I'm doing other stuff and nobody ever shows up. But every once in a while, it's like, hey, I'm getting ready for this QBR. Like this morning, there was a QBR coming up, and one of our directors of management popped in and said, hey, do you have a few minutes to talk through a couple of slides here? Yeah, sure, no problem. Right. Yeah. And it's my time I've set. I'm not planning or doing anything, but I also have a backup. Like I have something I'm going to do in the background, but if I get interrupted, no big deal. I'm planning on that.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if somebody comes to me on a Tuesday and says, hey, can we chat about this? I'm like, can this wait till tomorrow? And you just pop into my office hours. Oh yeah, sure. No problem.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. I try to do skip level meetings. So, you know, whether it's, and I think that's been really helpful too, right? So my directors direct reports, they don't directly report to me, but I, you know, through the course of any given month, sometimes less than that, I try to do, you know, kind of every 2 weeks, I'll have a one-on-one catch up with the entire team. And again, I think, like, I love the office hour idea. That's a great one too. As a leader, like that, again, that like intentionality of setting that time on someone's calendar where they get just me, my undivided attention. Let's talk about what you're going through. What projects are you working on? Sometimes we'll get on those calls and we talk about nothing but just personal, like a quick personal catch up, right? That just goes back to that intentionality. Like it's not an easy thing to do, and it takes up a lot of your calendar. And I don't think probably enough leaders focus and realize how important that is to the team. Like it really matters to them.
And I think in a remote environment, it's harder to forget about it, right? Because it's like in an office environment, you're going to walk down that hallway, you're going to see like, oh, I haven't caught up with so-and-so in a while.
Yeah.
And yeah, sure, their name is in that Slack thing down in direct chats, but it's just not the same. So you do have to be, you're totally right. Like you have to be much more intentional about those things. And we definitely try to do that as well. Like once a month or at least once a quarter, trying to catch up with each individual that doesn't directly report to us. And again, we have a much smaller team too.
Yeah. It's not easy. Like none of this stuff is easy, right? I think that's why all the kind of best practice sharing, and as we're all kind of fumbling through it, doing this kind of thing, right? And really sharing like, hey, these are the things that we do that seem to work pretty well, is really important.
Yeah. One other thing I'll throw out there, I'm curious on your thoughts is structuring meetings both from an attendance perspective and a agenda perspective just makes such a difference. Because I think a lot, again, I feel like in a remote environment especially, and with marketing being such a collaborative function, that people just default to, okay, well, I need to make a decision and I need to have these 15 people involved and let's just have a meeting to talk about X, and that's the agenda. It's like, well, wait a second. Why are these other 12 people here? And what is the purpose and what is the desired outcome? What do you want them to walk when this meeting is done? What do you want to have achieved?
Yeah. I've got I'll say depending on kind of my audience, I'm probably better at that than, I don't do it all the time, but if I have a call with my CEO or anyone else kind of, that I know just has tight calendar or whatever, I just, you kind of read the personality, right? I've got a couple of my team members too who've been really good, and they'll come to our one-on-ones with like a living document that they'll just track kind of everything they have going on, and we'll chat through it. We'll bring it up every single meeting, and it's a nice way to kind of keep us on track and organized. But yeah, I think that stuff that's huge. It's huge to make sure that you're not wasting people's time. But then the flip side of that, and this is where, again, some of the other channels and kind of things that you do become really important are, you really lose the banter, right? And I get it. Not everyone wants to get on a call, and like a lot of people are just like, I just want to tell me why I'm here. Let's get off. But again, that kind of water cooler talk, or those quick catch ups, or hey, let's go grab coffee. You get less of that, I think, sometimes when you've got just real strict agendas, and you get in, you accomplish what you need to accomplish, and everyone hangs up, and you're just sort of like starts to feel really mechanical.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's on our end. That's something I think we're definitely struggling with a little bit. Is on the one hand, it's okay, we need to be more efficient
and productive,
with our time, especially as a consultancy. So billable hours and all that fun stuff, right? But on the flip side, it's okay, how can we make team meetings and these other like one-on-ones and things more, as you were saying, intentional of, okay, let's talk about you as a whole person, not just the work that you're working on.
Yeah. We did, I don't know if I'm sure there's tons of different names for them, but we've done these things called life maps or life journeys, where, I'll try to schedule a happy hour, maybe once a quarter. We all jump on the phone, and everyone gets 5 minutes, to kind of tell their life story, tell the milestones of, what got them to where they are, where they're from. Some people talk about family, pets, work, just the whole gamut. And that's been really fun. It kind of gives you that peek into someone's life outside of the kind of work screen. So, if you've got a newer team, or, a team that you feel like maybe you guys don't know each other kind of personally very well, that kind of thing is really fun. We actually had a girl, super creative. She came, and the way that she told us her kind of life map or her life journey and the things she likes is she took her search history in her phone for the last like 3 months and put it up and presented it to us. And like, it was hilarious. She had stuff where,
that's funny.
There was a Google search for like a blackbird, and she's like, oh, this is because I was walking down by my house and I wondered what kind of bird that was. So I Googled it. I mean, it was so that kind of stuff, you kind of get people coming out of their shell a little bit, and it's a real creative way to get to know people.
Yeah. I love that. I love that example. We do sort of something similar. We have, anytime anybody starts, we have them put together like a user manual, quote unquote. That's what we call them. So like, how do I like to work and something like that. And there's some background things too, like favorite quotes, and
I like that.
And then they have to present it to the team at the end of their first week. So then everybody kind of gets to know a little bit about them. But I like what you're describing, because it's a little bit more, than that.
Yeah. I mean, you can't do it, and then we'll try to do stuff, leveraging mentees, like, it's a great tool as far as, just being able to kind of crowdsource different things. We did one time where I had a mentee for every single person on the team, and we took, I don't know, it probably took maybe an hour. We all grabbed a drink, came back, and I said, what has so-and-so done this quarter that's, impacted you or the team, and the kudos that people throw up right on that mentee, and you start to read it. And as we did it for me too, like as a leader, what have I done that's helped you guys? And it's really it does give you a really nice kind of shot in the arm, right, to hear what your team would say about you and the impact that you have on the team and the business and them. So that was another kind of cool one that we did that I think everybody really enjoyed.
Yeah, that one it's so important. And like, I'm the type of person that I remember working for others and I always hated that. It's like, I don't need the pats on the back. Let's just do our jobs.
Yeah.
And I had to totally train that out of myself because most people are not like me. Like, and even I, every once in a while, I'm like, okay, well, can I get a little pat in the back? Like once a year, maybe,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, other people just really, really thrive on that. And you have to give it to them.
For sure. I think it has to do too with kind of your career progression, right? Like, if you're just kind of coming in, you've only been working for, let's call it 3 to 5 years or something like that. Like you're in those early stages where you're learning a ton. That reinforcement of like, hey, you're doing all the right things. Here's where you're really strong. Keep it up. Like, here's the things that you really bring to the table. I think, it's, and again, that's a great motivator, right? Like you hear directly from your team just how impactful you've been. And sometimes it's stuff that they didn't even think about. They're like, oh yeah, I forgot I did that project. Right. And, and someone else is kind of like, oh my gosh, that was the highlight of my quarter was, working with you on that thing. So, I think as you kind of progress in your career, it does kind of become less and less. And I think you start focusing more on your team and their motivation, less, I think, maybe on kind of your own. Like, I don't worry about my own motivation because I already know I have it, but like making sure that I really help inspire, my whole team every day.
Yeah, for sure. Although I'm sure getting a nice pat on the back from the CEO doesn't hurt, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And if I don't hear from him for a while, I'll ping him like, hey, remember me out here?
Yep. So I think good time to transition to tool sets in terms of, okay, as an example, being intentional about giving kudos and feedback. Let's talk about tools. And I usually make this broad in terms of, yes, it could be actual technology that you use and how you execute against that, but then also it could be a process or a document or whatever it is. Like, it doesn't have to be a formal tech thing necessarily. So pretty open-ended. Like, let's start with the whole kudos and motivation thing. What do you need to execute against that?
I mean, I think you have to plan it, like all this intentionality we keep talking about. Like you gotta, as a leader, right? You gotta be looking 3 months ahead. Like, what am I doing? What am I doing in the next quarter? What am I doing 2 quarters from now? And, if you're going to do kind of a happy hour or something like that, right, where you're going to kind of do this kudos sharing, put it on the calendar now for March or April, and just, you have to be thinking about this stuff all the time. And really kind of just prepping and planning for it. And then use various channels. Like we use the Teams chat. We've leveraged Menti before. Trying to think what else we've really used.
Can you talk about the Menti thing? I mean, I think I and most people understand what it is, but the way people structure it is sometimes different. So maybe talk about that a little bit more. What does your Menti program, if you will, look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's super, super simple. I'll set up like a slide for each person. And then we literally just kind of tick through each one. And I give everybody, maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds to do a response, let people give more than one response, and, kind of not a Wordle, but it'll throw up the responses just in, anonymously. And then we'll do a readout of it, and I'll kind of lead the whole thing and say, okay, reread the question, read a lot of like the answers and kudos. And then I usually ask people like, hey, does anyone want to expand on any of theirs? And a lot of times people jump in with stories. And I haven't heard stories about my team that I did not know, like things when we've been at events and, kind of after hours stuff that I'm like, oh, you guys, but and
maybe you didn't want to know.
Yeah, exactly. But again, even that comfort level, right, of them feeling like, she's, we can be transparent with our CMO. Like I'm super open with them on, I tell them all the time, I'm an open book. Like I will literally tell you as much as I can, aside from something being really confidential, like I'm going to be super open and honest about things. Yeah. So that's kind of how we've structured Menti before. It's really simple.
Mm-hmm. So, what about any other tools, again, around any of the other things we've talked about? Like what do you believe are the critical tools? And again, I use the word tools fairly loosely here, that a leader needs.
So when I was kind of thinking about this topic, there were, I wrote down transparency, culture, and intentionality as sort of the three things that I think a leader really has to keep in mind. One of the other kind of, again, using tools loosely, I mentioned kind of this rally cry that we have, this mantra we have as a team. So celebrate everything, stop at nothing. And it speaks to the speed that we kind of all run at and operate at, but it also speaks to those, those wins, and like, we're all in this together. We're going to celebrate all these little wins. We're going to celebrate all the little milestones. And I think if you don't have it's worked really well for us. I think if you don't have some type of, I don't know, call it a rally cry, call it a theme, you could do it each year. But if you don't have that for your team, I'd encourage leaders to kind of think about that. Of course, the business is going to have its big strategy. You're gonna all be marching toward the same thing. But is there something that your team really stands for? Like the culture of our team is that rally cry, that mantra. Like we live, eat, breathe it. When we bring new hires on, they fit that mold. Like we're energetic, we're passionate. I hire people that show up a certain way to meetings, and so I think that's a really good, it served us really well to kind of have that rallying point for everybody.
And how do you make that action, that rallying cry, my goodness, can't talk. How do you make the rallying cry actionable and kind of like bring it to life and empower people to kind of live it, if you will?
Yeah. Again, I think so much of it is kind of a top down thing. If I'm on, and this goes back, I keep saying this intentionality. If I'm on calls with an executive and they mention one of my team members, or I get a Teams chat from someone like, hey, this webinar was awesome, turnout was awesome, the follow-up was great, I immediately go into that team chat and drop in that feedback. And I think that kind of stuff, that's really that, all those, celebrating those little wins. We started like a hashtag with it. So, sometimes when people drop, hey, had a record, number of attendees for this thing or whatever, they'll put hashtag celebrate everything, stop at nothing. I got everybody notebooks for Christmas that have the same kind of slogan. So I think it just, you just kind of, depending on what it is, like we've really, little hashtags or little mentions of it, or, kind of reminding each other of it, has just been how we've kept it alive.
Nice. Yeah. I like those little physical reminders and digital reminders of that.
Yeah.
I'd say we're fairly similar. Like we have a kudos channel and a shout outs channel. We have a raving fans channel, like feedback from clients.
Yeah. I love that.
Or like audiences and all that kind of fun stuff. And then, we did add in an ethos into our culture. I mean, it was always there, but it was never formalized. And, it's people first. So that we have that. So yeah, totally. Everything you're saying totally resonates.
Yeah.
All right. Any other tools or anything else that you want to call out? Again, specifically anything that stands out as maybe unique to a marketing leader?
Probably, I mean, I don't know if there's anything that we haven't kind of already touched on. I just, I keep going back to this, communication, transparency, make sure you're sharing stuff with your teams. It's just, the remote environment is tricky. And so I think the more that you can be intentional about your communication, share kudos, share that stuff, right? Like, I mean, the impact that it has, if I'm on a call with my CRO and he's like, hey, so-and-so did, was just on a call with so-and-so on your team, they did awesome. I could easily just kind of take that and be like, oh, great. Like, I'm so pleased. Like, that's awesome. But for me to, make the move and say, hey, was just on a call with our CRO, like, he gave you major shout outs and kudos, and the impact that has on that team member is massive. And it takes 5 seconds, right? And so I think we just have to remember these things and remember that people are sitting at home and they're not privy to a lot of the stuff that we are, at the C level. And so I think you gotta make sure you share that stuff and cascade those messages down and all those wins and things like that.
Yeah, in the more remote environment, even less so, right? Because
Yeah.
in the office, you might accidentally overhear something as,
Right.
they're walking in or out of a board meeting or something
Right.
like that, but you don't have that at all.
Yeah.
When you're in a remote environment.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, Ashley, this has been awesome. I think you shared a lot of really great insights and tips. So appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let's jump into our lightning round real quick.
Okay.
All right. Question number 1. What is the main KPI you use to evaluate marketing success?
So, this is really tactical, but we have a subset, sort of net new logos is probably the subset of pipeline that I would say is what I really would point to.
What is something new that you're looking forward to testing out next year or this year?
A big ramp in digital. So, we talked about kind of taking some of those event dollars and pushing them to digital, doing things like retargeting, and just being much more honed in on that. I think I'm really excited to see what we can do with it.
What is a marketing best practice that you actually hate and you think needs to go by the wayside?
A marketing best practice.
Quote unquote best practice.
Quote unquote best practice. I can I change the answer, or can I change the question just slightly? Like a thing, like a trend right now that I want to disappear?
Sure.
Okay. This whole debate again around like lead gen, demand gen, lead creating demand, like I get all sides, right? I get all of it, but like the fact that it has become such a debate, like out on LinkedIn and stuff like that, just has me like, I just crack up every time I see it. It's such a strange thing to be so passionately debating.
I agree, very much so. We can save that for a separate conversation.
Okay, I love it.
But yes, what is your least favorite business word or phrase?
I'm going to have to think about that one for a second. I'm sure I have a few. My least favorite. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I'll come back to you with something really good.
Sounds good. What is your favorite business or marketing book?
Oh, I just got, I'm going to forget the name, Your Next 5 Steps. One of our sales leaders actually just recommended it to me. I'd have to get you who the author is, but it's like a business strategy book that I just started that I'm really, really enjoying.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. I haven't heard of that one. I know we're at time. I know you had a hard stop, so I want to be cognizant of that. So thank you again. This was fun. Hope you had a good time.
I did.
And everybody else, we will see you all next week.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Master Marketer Show. We'll be back next week with more B2B marketing success stories. Visit our website, www.proofpoint.marketing, for the full episode library, complete with show notes, guides, templates, and more. Make sure to follow Proofpoint Marketing on LinkedIn and YouTube so you never miss an episode. Listen every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.